Welcome back to our CoC 201 training series. We're going to talk today about the CoC structure. This is going to include your CoC board and your CoC committees and who does what. So in the Western PA CoC, the CoC governing board consists of 21 voting members. And ideally, you're really representing a broad variety of stakeholders within the CoC. So that includes homeless service providers, victim service providers, faith-based organizations, housing entities, school districts, social service providers, law enforcement, all these different folks who contribute to addressing homelessness in your community. One thing I will note is that the CoC also specifically includes 2 individuals who are currently or formerly experiencing homelessness at a minimum. And as of 2020, the board also includes 2 representatives from the Youth Advisory Board, which we'll talk about in a moment. The board also includes a representative of the Collaborative Applicant HMIS Lead, so DCD also sits on the board. And those board positions are appointed, the DCD position, and they do not adhere to the selection process and the term limits. They're kind of on the board consistently over time to represent that CoC Collaborative Applicant HMIS Lead perspective. So the governing board structure, the board includes 5 officers, and the officers include 2 co-chairs, one who represents the Northwest RAB and one who represents the Southwest RAB. It includes 2 co-secretaries, one representing the Northwest RAB and one representing the Southwest RAB, and then 1 immediate past member. And these board officers constitute your executive committee. So in terms of advertising for board seats and how you kind of fill the board seat. So there is a process for advertising the positions for the board and letting folks know, like, hey, we're recruiting a board member who represents this specific seat on the board, for example, an at-large member or a hospital representative from the Northwest or the Southwest RAB. So if after 3 months of advertising for a representative of a certain category to fill that designated board seat and no rep is found, that seat will be converted to an at-large position and advertised to the full CoC. Once that position's vacated, you go back to recruiting for the original category. As much as possible, the board is comprised of an equal number of representatives from the Northwest and Southwest regions, and this is done through really targeted recruitment and selection. And your CoC board meets every other month. A board member may serve 2 consecutive full terms, and a full term is defined as 3 years without their position being advertised, provided that they're fulfilling their duties and expectations and agrees to serve an additional term. Board members who initially serve a partial term, for example, for maybe a seat that was vacated, are eligible to serve 2 additional full terms on the board. And once a board member has served 2 consecutive full terms, which would be essentially 6 years, the board will advertise to the full membership of the CoC to fill that board seat. So what are the expectations of the CoC board? The expectations are to provide overall direction and leadership for the CoC to fulfill its mission, to regularly attend board meetings in a prepared fashion, and also CoC meetings and RAB meetings, to serve on at least 1 committee, to suggest agenda items periodically to kind of flag issues that they're seeing in their community, and then reading and understanding the CoC's financial documents and really exercising prudence in the oversight of the CoC. Overseeing the CoC's financial moves is really a key part of the CoC board. In addition, board members are really intended to serve the CoC as a whole, rather than special interest groups, and make decisions that are in the best interest of the CoC overall, rather than for their local area organization. So a lot of times board members kind of have to take off their organizational hat and put on their board hat when making decisions. Board members must avoid conflict of interest or the appearance of conflict of interest board members may need to recuse themselves from certain discussions or decisions if they have a vested interest in that. For example, maybe it impacts their organization financially. Board members have to have a conflict of interest disclosure statement and disclose any new conflicts as well. And then the board also provides advice and guidance to the collaborative applicant and the CoC consultants as appropriate and offer support. In addition to the board, the CoC is made up of committees. So one committee is the executive committee, which we touched on. It's the officers of the board, which includes 5 folks, the co-chairs, co-secretaries, and immediate past members. And their role is to set the agenda for the full CoC and CoC board meetings, really be the liaison with the collaborative applicant, assess issues of non-compliance, and really oversee how the board is functioning, the implementation of the board's agenda. We also have a funding committee. The funding committee is made up of members who do not receive CoC funding. So they're called non-conflicted, meaning they're able to make decisions about CoC funding, but they don't have a vested stake in it because their organizations do not receive CoC funding. So their duties include coordinating the annual CoC project selection. This includes rating and ranking projects, selecting new projects for funding, and then also being involved in the process for other resources that become available to the CoC. So if there's new funding that comes online, the funding committee may play a role as well in designating how those funds are to be used in collaboration with the board typically. There is a governance committee. The duties of the governance committee include reviewing and updating the governance charter, developing MOUs with the collaborative applicant, HMIS lead, CE lead agency, ensuring that the board is following the governance procedures, etc. The coordinated entry committee is really charged with overseeing the operations of the coordinated entry system and the coordinated entry lead agency, discussing and voting on changes to policies and procedures that should be recommended to the board. And as written in the governance charter, the coordinated entry has the goal of having 2 voting members from each county, and other folks can participate as non-voting members. The CoC also has a system performance committee, also sometimes known as the data committee. Their role is to monitor sort of the HMIS process, ensure compliance, but really a lot of their work centers around monitoring system performance, data quality, making recommendations for improvement, implementing the CoC's monitoring plan, and really being the folks who are kind of looking at the CoC's data and helping move forward strategies for improving system performance. There is a newer committee, and we're recording this in 2021. So as of 2021, a new committee, which is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. The committee will work to create system change throughout the CoC to make sure that systems and programs are serving all individuals equitably. So this will include training, reviewing systems to ensure they're equitable, creating a strategic plan to help the CoC center the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then some other committees are the Veterans Committee, the Reentry Committee, the Youth Action Board, sometimes known as the Youth Advisory Board. This is made up of young adults with lived experience of homelessness, really help drive the CoC's work around addressing youth homelessness. And then there's also ad hoc committees. So the board may approve new ad hoc committees as needed to respond to different needs within the CoC. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you for the next module.